Hello, welcome to Staring Down the Storm, Autism Advocacy in America. I'm your host, Tabitha Ziegler.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. I've got my friend David with me. David, introduce yourself for everybody.
Hi, I'm David Delisle, and I've been leading a movement to change the way we teach financial literacy to our kids.
So what's new, David?
What's new? One of the more exciting things is I've been working on this discovery card deck to inspire conversations as a family, with the kids, between kids, at schools. And that's finally been completed, produced. It's with my distributor. So I've got a few copies of those, which is really fun. They're conversation prompts that plant the seeds of just thinking a little bit differently. So I'm really excited about that.
Okay. Well, as you know, there's always a ton of stuff going on over here. So I'm curious what's going on in Canada.
Canada, there's always stuff going on. More than
Canada
anything,
it's always our peaceful neighbor to the north. So by default, you're going to be more peaceful than what I've got.
we are more peaceful. To be honest, avoid a lot of the news these days just because it just distracts me from the stuff I want to be focused on.
Yeah.
But I do know there's definitely a lot of Canadians that are still not very happy with the Americans and the American administration. So I travel often and frequently to the US.
Yeah.
I don't have many friends that do. They've, for now, until things change, boycotted, travel to the US and as much US products as they can. So, Canadians are just quietly protesting, doing their thing is what's sort of happening over here.
Good for them. I'm actually all about that sort of thing, which brings me to something else I was going to discuss. I don't know how much of a history buff you are, but I am a fan of history, and I think most people should start to be. So are you aware of the Ken Burns documentary that he just put out a few days ago on the American Revolution?
No, but I've heard he's one of the best documentarists, and I've been meaning to watch a few of his things for a while now. So, yeah.
Well, you definitely should hit up this one. And they had, let's see, I think the first episode was 2 days ago. But I was just briefly going over some of the stuff yesterday, and I came across a couple quotes that I thought were interesting, because a lot of people aren't aware that women were pretty instrumental in the protest movement leading up to the American Revolution. So in this documentary, I'm going to give you two quotes. I wish to see America boast of empire not established in the thraldom of nations, but a more equitable base. And let the daughters of liberty nobly arrive, and though we've no voice but a negative here, we stand firmly resolved and bid them to see that rather than freedom, we'll part with our tea. And I was like, how clever is that? Like, these are women that have, absolutely no reign over anything that's going on. And yet they still were trying to find their way towards protests. So, I appreciate the Canadians. I like Canadians. And, silent can be deadly too.
Silent can be. Well, and that's the thing is it's shifting behavior. Like I said, I try to stay out of politics and too much of it, but I would say for sure that some of the habits are shifting, including purchasing and buying habits. Like Canadians, we're right next to the Americans. So that is where we're going to be buying all of our products. It just makes sense. But that is quietly shifting. And I don't see that trend changing or reversing. Like that's the thing is some of these things when they happen, they're just not short protests. It's actually people just get used to purchasing differently. And you see it when people started looking for stuff that was more renewable or eco-friendly or, equitable for, where you're purchasing from. So I see that trend just once the shift happens, it's always a painful shift. But then once you get used to it, it sort of sticks. And I think we'll start seeing some of that just staying. I'm sure, I can't imagine, Canadian travel or Canadian purchases going back to what we saw, say 2 years ago anytime soon.
Well, I think it also really, it goes towards our global values too, right? I know, I wonder, are you guys also protesting Amazon up there?
Well, no. So right now it's more, people, you're going to have pockets, but as
Yeah.
a country, no. Yeah.
Because I would say the American public seems to be really making an effort to boycott Amazon, which I think is a big move. I do. I'm in a very rural area and it's really hard. And I think when you start to make these adjustments in your life, you realize just how hard it is. Like I was looking for something the other day. I went to like 6 different stores and couldn't find it. And then I realized, wow, Amazon has really become a monopoly over here because all of these different, small mom and pop shops and stuff like that we used to have, we just don't anymore. They just don't even exist. And, it doesn't matter whether you're going for groceries or lumber or whatever. I think once you're tuned into those types of things, you just weren't aware of, maybe it was steady in some places, maybe it was rapid in others, but the general public, I just think we kind of got snowed and we didn't see it. We weren't aware that, all these businesses were basically closing right under our noses. And we were just distracted, I guess, by everything, social media and whatnot. And, I'm also noticing a big shift that way too. That people are being a little bit more conscientious and trying really hard to filter out the nonsense. And I know a lot of Americans right now, I would say if you asked 8 out of 10 people right now, they get their news from podcasts and stuff like that. And I think, being of a similar generation, we probably would have never thought in a million years that would be the case. Like, even though I was on the tail end of it, like I remember the Walter Cronkites and all of these types of people that, they got on, they were impartial, they spoke the news, we had national news, international news, but all this commentary and, really biased and I think, sort of manipulating, right? Like a lot of these big companies have an agenda and then now also they own a lot of our national newspapers. And I don't think anybody saw it happening, but now they're starting to be aware of it. And now there's this sort of tidal wave in the US. Like you're just rapidly trying to catch up, meanwhile, trying to make like as best effort as you can to put your money in the hands of individuals or good people or good organizations. I mean, the questions that I ask now whenever I go into a business about anything, just I could be buying a pair of socks or a pair of boots, and the questions that are coming out of my mouth about how this company does business or where that money is going or what types of things they support, it's kind of it even shocked me the other day. Like I can't say I step in a store very often, but when I do, I know like I'm going to be asking the salesperson a load of questions that are not necessarily what size and what color.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's the thing that I don't think people fully appreciate or realize. Like Amazon's not evil. Donald Trump's not necessarily evil. It's they're responding to what the public wants and their behavior. So if we don't like the monopoly, exactly as you said, we can choose differently. But what's happened is people chose convenience and price over, the local mom and pop shops, and that's what's happening. So exactly, to change that, we have to change our behavior. And as soon as we do, the market reacts. If all of a sudden in your town, everybody was like, we're only buying local, we're only buying from like second generation businesses or people that we've known and we're friends with and great customer service and all of this other stuff, that's what would flourish. and that's what would fill the market. And we have a lot more control than I think people realize.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing is in response to like consumer behavior.
Well, there's a big boycott coming. I don't know if you guys are aware of it, but in the States, I want to say it's starting like November 28th. So like Black Friday, and it's going to go for at least a week. And I think a lot of people are going to participate actually. And, something that I've been doing that kind of surprised me. But I think more people are doing this too. I'm pretty much going cash only. Like if I can put physical money in a small business's hands, like I've talked to some of my friends that own small businesses and they're like, look, like that's essentially easy for us. Like that's how we like it. And I don't think people were aware either just how many people have their fingers in your information every time that you're using your card. I think, people were kind of duped that way too. They're like, oh yeah, the convenience, it's great. And sign up for the discount email or whatever. And we just weren't aware what these companies were doing with this information. And it seems, at least in the US, like rapidly coming to light, right? With Palantir and all these different things that are just constantly in our faces about, things that might not be ideal for, say, your normal citizen. You're like, whoa, hold on a minute. Like, I didn't really agree to that. Like, I don't like that. That doesn't sound nice to me. I don't want you doing that with my information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. And I mean, the information is valuable because again, it's patterns. So it's, these companies aren't looking at individuals, they're looking at trends and patterns.
Right.
And they've got software and psychologists and people looking at that. And that's again, they're reacting to what people respond, like how those mass trends happen. It's what people are doing, and they know that, and it's crazy. And it is crazy because they can run rapid testing as well, so they can see if I do this, what happens? If I do this, what happens? And then if it becomes nefarious, then there's, they can completely change public thought and how we act.
Oh, well, I think it's definitely nefarious over here, my friend. I don't think you guys probably are having the same experience over there. Hopefully not. But
well, it does bleed over.
Does it?
Yeah.
A little, in little bits.
It bleeds over, and we have those things. And I think that's the thing is we just aren't people aren't fully aware of what's happening. And it's one of those things where they're not aware. And then once they are aware, there has to be enough pain for people to want to change. That's the problem. People typically are lazy and don't want to change. So you need a bit of that, catalyst to create and make people want to change. And so that's where we started at the top, and you're asking about Canada. I think that's what happened with the buying behavior with the US. People didn't like hearing that, Canada was going to be assimilated and be the, the next state, for example. And so there was just so much anger towards that. It created change, but it took a lot. Like I couldn't imagine changing that behavior prior to that, because even before that, just from a economic standpoint, it made sense not to boycott the US, but just to open up other avenues of trade so we weren't heavily reliant. Back to, like you were saying, with Amazon having a monopoly. Monopolies are never good. So just opening up other options and supply chains, and different political leaders would talk about this, but it was never that popular. It wasn't a winning position, and people didn't really care. It wasn't until the anger came that the behavior changed.
Well, speaking of movements, I was on a phone call the other day that I found really fascinating. I'm trying to put myself out there in different zones than maybe I would have. And there's this group called the Sunrise Movement. Are you aware of that?
No.
Your kids might be.
Oh,
So it's sort of a younger movement. And they are interested in trying to find ways to improve global development of like ecological resources, and through strikes and protests and things of that nature, kind to like force change. And it was really interesting to sit on that call. And I was surprised actually, because I was not the like one of the oldest ones there, because it seems like it's more of a student movement. But on the call I was on, at least, there were a couple ladies that had participated in like the civil rights movement. And I'm like, interesting. Okay, so I'm not the only one interested in these types of things. But you should look them up. I'm
Yeah.
curious if anybody in Canada is aware of it, but it seems like a cool thing.
Yeah. Well, that is, kids are becoming more aware of stuff, which is great. And I do love seeing that. I do worry about the lack of action though. So
Yeah,
there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of protests that don't actually
right,
have any action. They're just loud voices.
right.
And I think because our children are growing up with the internet and social media, loud voices become the lever and the power and the tool.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's really action that creates change.
Well, yeah. And having conversations like this, which brings up something else. So I like podcasts, obviously, or I probably wouldn't be running one. And I see the value in having the conversations and opening people's minds and all that. So randomly, I came across this podcast called The Better Future with Michael Metz. And that's how I heard about this sunrise movement. So for
Mm.
the older people like me, right? Let's see. It was the first episode. I'm going to butcher this lady's name, so, sorry in advance. Aru Shiny Ajay. And it's the first episode is Capitalism Compatible with a Green Future. So I think you would be fascinated by some of these
Mm.
episodes. Every
That would
once in
be
a while, I
good.
come across a podcast and I'm like, sparks critical thinking, you know?
Yeah. What's your feeling on that? Is capitalism uh, compatible with a green future?
You know, I was I was on another podcast Sunday called Who's Left, which was really fascinating. And I really loved that experience because it wasn't just me and somebody else. There was like a panel of us. There were four of us having conversations like this. And the talk of high speed trains came up with, basically, what are we going to do with all these young men with, these extremists that are trying to activate them in ways that are not beneficial towards anyone. And Scott was talking about, all guys like trains. Like every man essentially is like a 4-year-old boy when it comes to trains. And I'm like, fair point. And we had this whole conversation about how in the US, at least, the airline industry has really been, pulling the levers to put the kibosh on anything like that. And I thought, we have so many examples like that with capitalism and greed, and being of more of an older generation, right? Like I would have never considered myself older, but I am kind of now. You know, I was constantly straddling two worlds. Like when we grew up, we were still playing with sticks and dirt, and then we worked our way through like, okay, here comes the internet, here are computers, here are cell phones. Like we remember phones in a bag. So walking all these lines and, saddling these conversations between generations, that is why I'm putting myself in spaces like that, so I can hear more of what the younger generation is thinking and what they want. And I know, I won't even say that I think, because I know if our generation is really going to help create space for these younger kids, like we should be doing, because my thought is, our time is basically almost done. We should now be moving into the mentor type position so that we can reserve space for these younger generations to step into their own. And some of them have some brilliant ideas. And most of them seem to have compassion. Most of them want, like, their rationale is not necessarily like greed based. the types of conversations that I'm hearing are more like, why wouldn't you want universal health care? Like, why wouldn't you give babies formula? Like, why doesn't everybody have SNAP? Like things like that. And I'm like, you know, maybe two things, right? I think there are those of us that really, really want a better future because we want a better future for our children. And we see what that's going to take. And then there are those of us that are like, yeah, agreed, give me all the money. I don't care. Like, kill all the deer, kill all the moose. Who cares? I won't be here for it. Like, flood all the water with toxins, whatever. I'm going to be dead in 10 years. And then there are those of us that are like, no, we need to be thinking 7 generations in advance. We don't have to agree on everything, but there are some things that are just, screaming at us in our faces that we need to make a shift. And if some of these younger kids, if they're right, which every generation, the younger generation's wrong, right? Like they said that about us too. You're useless. You don't know what you're doing. Your ideas, they're not great. So with that type of mindset still, if we are to think as well, that the younger generation's saying, you don't know anything. We're the ones that know everything. I think if we can just start by giving them some space and hearing them out and being like, okay, you have this idea? Tell me how it will work. And, kind of convince us. And so far, I find a lot of their arguments really compelling. And I think there are a lot of CEOs and things like that right now in the States that their greed is disgusting. And, it doesn't seem to matter what business you're in, what industry you're in. It's all becoming the same. It's like, work yourself like a horse until you die. If you can't pay your medical bills, we're going to come and take your house and your farm and put you in the poorhouse. Then a lot of these people, if they don't have, maybe they didn't contribute enough into Social Security, they can't just live off of that. So they also have second jobs. The door greeter at Walmart is 70 or 80 years old, and they're not doing it because they need a hobby. They're doing it because they need money. And I think this younger generation, they've been watching this and they've been listening to these conversations that we're having about how, 40 years ago, maybe you were still able to have, a decent living off of one income. There's no way in the US anymore. Like, it's not even conceivable. Like, if even people that have 2 decent incomes are struggling, and everybody's just in this rat race of like, oh yeah, I need to be rich and I need to have this and all this stuff. I think that is starting to settle now because the greed is just becoming so exorbitant. And we've seen a lot of that in how our politicians are behaving towards the masses with some of these things that are coming down of like, yeah, you know what? I think for me, it started whenever we stopped giving money to, like starving orphans in Africa. And we were letting, peanut packets go to waste, or they were incinerated, or like, vaccines were being incinerated somewhere. Like, that's kind of when all this started for me. And I could see the forest for the trees. I'm like, right. Okay, we're going to start with those people over there. And then it's going to be the trans people. And then it's going to be, other people of color. I could see straight through all this. And so then once we now have gotten to conversations about autism and the disability community, and, now we're having conversations about the elderly and the unhoused and how all of these people don't matter and they're not worth serving. I'm greatly paraphrasing here. This is just how I see it. I'm like, right, who's next? And the US is just a matter of who's next. And then we have Epstein and all this, just the continuous rollout of BS is the nicest way I can put it. I think the American public now are starting to get to a point where they're like, right, maybe people, maybe not myself, maybe there are other people that were not aware. Like, I mean, we'll just like, they were living in a hole somewhere. They didn't have a television or a radio, and they just weren't aware. I think even those people now, like even the Amish at this point, they have at least been in a store and have heard something over the intercom about something nasty that's going on. Like, I think all of this hatred and nastiness has just permeated every bit of our society. And Americans are now at this point of looking themselves in the mirror and being like, right, what do we actually stand for over here? And what are we going to do about it? That was my long-winded answer.
I like it. I love this where we start looking at, trying to change what's going on and the greed. But this is where I think it gets really fun to start leaning into the curiosity side of things. Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of what my movement is based around. Even though it's financial literacy, it's really that curiosity, because all of these things, we got to start wondering, like, what are the motivations? What's making people do these things? Why is greed so prevalent? And if you look at the way we're learning and teaching and talking, it's people with more, better, and happier. Mm-hmm. And there's this drive for more. And it doesn't matter where you're at. Most people wish they had twice as much as what they had. So, someone with $1,000 wishes they had 2,000. Someone with $1 billion wishes they had 2 billion. Like, it's just, what next? There's no, we don't honor or love the contentment and peace. These aren't words we use. It's, more and growth and acquisition. And so once we start getting a bit curious, that's what I try to do with a lot of these kids, because I remember how funny it was going into some of these classrooms, and especially the younger classrooms. Like, these aren't even kids that are jaded or watching the news or trying to be, greedy corporate leaders or whatever it might be. These are kindergartners. Mm-hmm. And almost every one of those kindergartners, if I'm like, who here wants $1 million? All their hands go up. Mm-hmm. And that's because that's what they're being taught. And it's just crazy, because they don't even know what $1 million is. They just know they want it. Mm-hmm. And so that's where, when I start talking to them and coming back to it, it's all just these questions. So not telling them not to want the $1 million, but just, digging a little deeper. What would you do with it? Why do you want it? What would you buy? What would buying that do for you? And the reality is, the more we become curious and really think about what makes us happy and what we value, it's rarely things. I mean, that's why when people are on their deathbed, they don't usually talk about how much money they have or they wish they worked more. It's friends, family, missed opportunities. So it just naturally, the more we sit with just asking these deeper questions rather than assuming more is the answer, and actually asking, well, when were you happiest this past week? What about this past month? What lit you up? What brings you the most joy? And I love doing that with these kids, because it all of a sudden starts planting those seeds that it's actually not the $1 million. They're not going to be that happy with $1 million. They want to go bake cookies with their grandma. They want to ride bikes with their friends. They want to build sandcastles. It's usually the simplest of things, but they don't realize it because they've never stopped, even at that age, to really think about it. Mm-hmm. So I get really excited about this stuff, because this is where I find curiosity really lets us start to see things a little bit differently. So starting to figure out why we're seeing so much greed, what is happening. And a lot of times it's because that's all we know. Mm-hmm. And so I think about classes where I've gone in and spoken to schools, especially the younger grades where, I mean, these are just young kids. They're not watching, the news, and they're not tainted by what's going on. And yet they still, if I ask them who here wants $1 million, all of their hands go up.
Mm-hmm.
They're still wanting that money. They still know that that's going to make them happier. But then when I start asking them, like, what would you buy? Why? What's going on? And get a little bit more curious about what's underneath, that's where things get interesting. And that's where the questions are really great, because people usually find, as you start asking these questions, it's not more, it's time with family. Like with these kids, it's, baking cookies with grandma, or going for a bike ride with friends, or playing hide and seek. They love all these things, and it usually has nothing to do with the money, but they don't realize it because all we're taught is to have more. And that's the same with these businesses. Like right now, if the only incentive they have is to earn more money, and that's the only goal that they have that they need to achieve, that's what they're going to do. And as soon as we start changing that, and realizing that there's other metrics for success, it changes everything.
Well, that's what I always find really interesting about the Finnish system, is because it seems like they've made a real effort there to focus on things like that. And you can tell, I can't remember which video it was, but I'm fascinated by things like that. I really think, we have a lot to learn from one another. And, if supposedly all we care about is our future, our longevity, our legacy, what have you, it has to start with the kids. And, if you start to be in places having conversations with kids that start to say things like, I want to be a teacher. Why do you want to be a teacher? Well, I want to be a teacher because, I like kids, or I want to help kids. Or, I want to be a fireman. Well, why do you want to be a fireman? Because I like to help people. I think if we can start to turn this tide in that direction, it will start to solve a lot of our other problems. Like, for example, we're going to go a little bit down a darker road than you probably like, but still worth having the conversation. So in the US, there's been a big move towards, I think, misogyny. And that is very concerning. And we've been seeing multiple examples of really bad things going over here, like sexual assault, for example. And I came across some statistics that made me unnerved. I can't say that I'm shocked, but I'm going to go through the whole study with you. I'll send it to you later so you have it, just in case you're curious. But it's essentially said almost 90% of autistic females are sexually abused in their lifetimes. And there were statistics for boys as well. Now, you have boys, I've got boys and girls. And I was like, wow, oh my God, that gives a whole other sense of urgency. So I think sometimes when you're also talking about greed, things that overlap with greed are things like misogyny. And, if we do a good job, women and men, of trying to discourage certain things that are attached to, maybe patriarchy, misogyny, greed, that just don't benefit anyone, but for whatever reason seem to travel in a pack, if you will, I think we can start to inch forward in a lot of other positive ways. Because if we teach, compassion, emotional development in a positive light, as well as, hey, we don't have to be greedy. You can just take what you need. And along the way, if you are ever in a position where you amass a certain amount of wealth, then, like you said, what do you do with it? Then the response, hopefully, if we do enough good work over time, will be, right, well, I only take what I need. And so now I'm going to help people. And I think not a lot of men are having those types of conversations. And the women, we can scream it from the rooftops as much as we want. But to get few that are doing things like this to start to have those types of conversations. I just think it's a natural overlap. It's an added element of influence that in the tiniest ways of showing that, hey, I'm a man and I don't do these things. And this is what it means to be, a responsible man, a responsible father, a responsible mentor, and all those sort of things. Anyway, I'm rambling, but what are your thoughts on all that?
I mean, there's so much to unpack there, and something that I see a big shift happening, and in that shift, women rising, but most men dramatically falling and being lost. And so I really get worried because I see it even in my conversations. We see, like you said, this misogyny, and we see men still, holding the purse strings. We still see men in power. We see all these things. And so we assume that men are doing these things because they are. But the reality is that it's not most men. It's a very small percentage of men in those positions. Most men are falling behind. So there's stats that show like high performing men, high performing women, not the top 1%, but just high performers. Women are killing men in terms of stats, higher education, higher paying jobs, lower depression, lower suicide, lower incarceration, all of these things where we miss that because we are focused on the top 1% that we see at the top, really giving all men a bad name, but most are really falling behind. We see it all around. And I think the reason it hits so hard to me is because I've got two young boys. So I see how boys are treated versus how women are treated, like boys and girls. And even having conversations with like young 20-year-old women and even telling them this, and they don't like, a lot of them don't care. They want to see this shift where, men have been in charge for too long. So they don't mind if men take a big hit. But again, I think it's one of those things where they're missing that it's not men as a gender. It's a few men that are really swaying things. And like you said, if we're not teaching our young boys empathy and social development and empowerment themselves, like they're just going to be lost and not know where to go. And then unfortunately, if you're lost and you feel like you've been beaten and you don't know what's going on, and then it's out of nowhere have money or power, you might not use that in the best way.
Well, I think this brings up a really important conversation because I think women in general, it's all in the verbiage, right? So I think maybe what is also happening and why, right, is I'll use myself as an example. I can count on one hand the amount of women that I know from young to old that have never had any sort of like workplace harassment, sexual assault, or whatever. So I think women, girl to woman, have seen this happening. And now finally the like older generations like me, we are sort of now becoming like more of the matriarchs, and we're saying, no, put your foot down. I think what we now are expecting from men, like your generation, right? Because we're kind of a similar generation, is to take up the mantle more in that way of like, okay, things aren't perfect, but it's the language. And I think we're waiting for men in general to start cleaning house, right, with these ne'er-do-wells, and so that the boys club sort of disperses, and that there isn't this need to shield these fewer percentiles into the herd and sort of protect them. And I think if we start to see, and obviously I'm greatly like, I can't speak for all women, right? I'm just trying to kind of put it out there what I think I'm seeing. I think the response would be massive if just a mass response from the men in general was like, no, these guys are a-holes. We're getting rid of them. Like they don't work under our umbrella anymore. So another step to the advocacy of the men to help the young men and to help the boys is to raise them that way and be like, listen, women are actually your equals. Like, we can work together. We can rise together. And if you see the necessity and the partnership of that, and to take these young men that felt left behind, right, to start to bring them up that way, which I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I am seeing it, but I think, I'll speak on the US because that's where I am. You have this rise of this ultra conservative, really horrible, like, thoughts about women and where they should be. And I don't think that is so much they've been left behind. Part of it may be sort of like how religion is weaponized over here, for example. Part of it could be also part of that sort of thing where it's like, okay, we feel left out. Like maybe like if I were a 16-year-old boy, right? Be like, oh, I don't know how to talk to girls. I don't know who to talk to. I've never asked a girl out on a date. I can't get a job. I don't know who to ask about getting a job. Nobody in my life is really a mentor or I feel that I can talk to. And they also don't feel like maybe they can go and speak to the women. There's that vacuum there where these really conservative, twisted minds are getting in there and then they're exploiting that. So we need guys like you getting in there and being like, listen, buddy, like, even though we say most men aren't this way, there are those that are giving us all a bad name. And so therefore, in order for us to reach the point of where we want to be and to create the future that we want for all of you, we have to meet the women halfway. And I do think the women will then, it will balance. That's my personal opinion. Because in my own household, I don't want my sons to do worse than my daughter. But I also know that my daughter is going to be walking into a world that for whatever reason seems to be going backward. So then just me, myself, in my own household, I'm going to rep it up like tenfold so that I feel like maybe I can give my daughter all the skills that I possibly can to combat this really violent world that she's going to be going into. Meanwhile, for my sons, hopefully I can swing at that direction too of like, listen, if you can find partnership by being kind, showing humility, being a good steward of the land, whatever, like all of these things that actually make you a better man, whoever you end up with, because I don't care about that part. And I'm sure we're very like-minded that way. I just want my kids to be happy. But whatever kind of partner that they get at the end of that, it doesn't matter whether it's going to be a man or a woman, then you'll be balanced. And I think it's all about finding that balance and promoting that. And I really believe, speaking from my own experience, I would love to see more men just like very blatantly be like, listen, we don't agree with this. We need to do something about it.
Do you feel most men don't feel that way? Or even voice it? I think of
in
the
the
circles
States,
I run in.
So, and this is why this is an interesting conversation, right? Because I'm going to be speaking from the States and you're going to be speaking primarily from Canada, right?
Yeah.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm down in Texas quite a bit. So I see that as well.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about the Canadian perspective and the Texas perspective. From the Indiana perspective, what I'm seeing is I think still there are a lot of guys that their knee-jerk response would be when they hear something really horrible, right? Be like, well, we probably don't have the full story on that. And I will say, like, let's say it's just a story of one man and one woman, or boy and girl, right? Not multiple things, just like a one for one. I would say normally the response would be more that way. Or maybe there's like more of a misogynistic type joke. Or, maybe, well, things wouldn't be that way if women weren't so hard. Or maybe, because women are wanting more autonomy, if they kind of want to be treated like men, they will treat them like men. So it's almost sort of like throwing the baby out with the bathwater, that I'm not quite sure what needs to happen to make some of these people around me that I'm around, not saying that they're bad guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
But to really put a mirror up to it in a way that they're like, oh my God, like I could have never seen that from your perspective, when maybe all the women that surround them, if they were willing to actually have the conversation and talk about the hard things, like they have women probably in their households that would set them straight and be like, listen, for whatever reason, you're just not open enough to take it in. And then they instantly fall into this whole guys club, protecting the guys sort of thing, when they would get so much more support if they were like, you know, that shouldn't happen, or go farther with it and we should make laws so that this doesn't happen. Like just acknowledging like, hey, this bad stuff is happening, without the what was the woman's part in it, or questioning that constantly. Just sort of like calling a spade, right? Like, for example, my opinion is rape is rape. Like, not all guys do it, but if they do it, whether they're 14 or 89, there's something about them that they feel entitled to violate someone else's physical, emotional boundary that way, that they think that's okay. Because I think it's sort of that whole theory, right? Where it's like, you didn't trip and fall. Like, it wasn't like, oops, just one day I just fell and then that happened. It doesn't work like that. Like, decisions are made, and then what I see over here is there seems to be a acceleration of excusable behavior for like really heinous activity, and it's activating the women. It's like damn near militarizing us, where we're like, not today, sir. Like, and I'm one of them where I'm like, I will spend every last ounce of my energy protecting every girl around me so that this stuff doesn't happen, even if I'm going up against maybe a whole town full of men. Like, that is my opinion. There are also probably people in my own family that are women that would be willing to make more excuses for that type of stuff. So I may be more like polarized in one direction than the other, but I also think I'm a very logical person and I have good critical thinking skills. So I can dissect these different things and I'm willing to have the conversations. I think maybe in the US population right now, critical thinking skills are lacking. And like we spoke about last time, that whole, like independent thought thing maybe is not functioning well en masse here. So anyway, that's kind of my observation from Indiana and from the United States of America.
Yeah, I mean, so first I'll say something that surprised me in more recent years, like having more. So one, I think having the conversations and bringing things to light is really important, because a massive gap in my knowledge was that essentially every adult female that I know has experienced sexual assault.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, there aren't many that haven't. Definitely
Mm-hmm.
not adult women. I didn't realize it was everyone,
Mm-hmm.
because we don't hear about it, because there's so much shame around it.
Mm-hmm.
Women aren't even telling their friends about it,
Yeah.
let alone men. And
Right.
and so a lot of it, men, well, for me anyway, I'll just speak for myself.
Yeah, speak for yourself.
I didn't realize how prevalent it was. So that was a big shock and interesting. Even
Yeah.
these ideas of like women living in constant fear, like that doesn't even register for men. Like
Mm-hmm.
we can't even relate to that concept of living in constant fear. I remember hearing something where they're just like asking women, like, what would you do if all of a sudden there are no men in the world? And the answer is like, well, I'd go for a run with my headphones on.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, wow, like that's a level
Brave.
of fear and protection. You're like, it wouldn't even cross my mind that was going through the average woman's head of like, I can't go for a run safely and just zone out.
Well, like for the boys, for example, like just an example of the type of teaching that say goes on between girls, not even the women, right? But maybe older girls to younger girls, like the teaching, the whole, like, weave your car keys through your fingers whenever you're in a parking lot. Like if you're putting groceries in your car, like position the cart in a way to where your back is always to the car so no one can get behind you. Like I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would doubt that most men are having these types of conversations with like boys, especially teenage boys.
Yeah, no, they aren't at all. And not only are they're not even aware these conversations are happening. So that's what I'm saying is, as we recognize the state of fear, and just being constantly on guard that women are, like, that'll change some of this. So I'd say that right off the bat as the first thing. Most men aren't even aware. That's why it's like, well, I don't know. It's fine, because I don't, like, they're not aware of how much is going on.
Yeah,
So it
they
just
kind
sounds
of
like,
oh, I don't do it, so.
exactly. And not only do they not do it, none of their friends do it, because no one's going to say, oh, by the way, this is what I've been doing on the weekends, or I just raped a girl. Like,
Yeah.
so nobody knows anyone personally who is a rapist, not guys.
But they don't think they do.
That's what I'm saying. Like, nobody. So they're in this bubble of just not seeing it or being aware of it. So as women voice what's going on louder, that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing, because then we can actually all see the problem for what it is. But it sucks because there's so much shame around it, and it's, usually coming out, the victim gets hurt twice, rather than getting justice. So that'd be one. And then again, for me, I always look at, rather than trying to get like the men, like my peers on side, which is important. It feels so difficult to change human behavior that's baked in. So I started looking at the kids. And so like I look at even how my boys are raised. I didn't raise them with like heavy-handed, respect women, do this is how a man is.
Yeah.
I raised them with female friends. So they're their peers, so they could relate with them, and it wasn't weird. So even now, like my older son, he's in grade 11, my younger one's in grade 8. They both still have female friends. They're not weird about it. It doesn't have to be this us versus them, because they've grown up their whole lives with friends that are females, and they don't treat them any different than their male friends. And my older son, who's now in relationship, also sees her. Yeah, it's sort of it's a big change. Yeah, it's a big change. It's interesting.
Yeah.
But it's neat because it wasn't, here's someone he's really attracted to, and he saw it. It was, here was someone he was friends with, the friendship grew, and then a relationship came out of it. Because he wasn't looking at women as objects or something to covet or something to just be attracted to. He just saw them as humans and friends. Yeah.
What a good dad you are, honestly.
Well, the thing is, it's easy if we just look at it differently. Like,
no, but I'm just saying to you, like, this is the exact thing that I'm talking about here, right? Like, as a female, as a lesbian, you know, a straight guy, I can be like, high five, David, way to go. Like, you're the example of what we need to see more of, because I do think you're right. You're probably not going to change the opinion of, you know, your local 50-year-old down at the pub. But yeah, you probably, by demonstrating good, positive behavior, even if it's just kids that see you and see how you treat women, maybe that 20-year-old down the street will be like, I kind of want to be like David.
Yeah. No, and that's the thing. It's just leading by example. It's these little things. On top of that, I've got a lot of female friends, and I made sure my boys met them, saw them around the house. Like, these aren't girls I was dating. These aren't girls I was attracted to. They're just, it's just normal, and just normalizing that behavior. And that's the thing, is like, as soon as we start having the us versus them, and that's where I get a little worried about, for example, like the Me Too movement, not because it's illuminating something that's really needs to be addressed. It's more that if the pendulum swings too far of like, again, us versus them, we're going to see this rise in misogyny and all this other thing. It's going to be like a lashback. Whereas instead it should be like, we're all in this together. Like, this is, we're all human. We're all, you know, we all have mothers and sisters, aunts, and like, it should be a bit more universal. And I think that's how we start, you know, just slowly breaking some of these dynamics. Because right now it is still men on one side, women on other. And as that remains, there will always be, you know, friction.
I think probably why this is like scary right now in the States is because, you know, there is real, like, palpable fear here. And I think the older generation of women really see that for what it is, especially the ones that are older than me, right? And obviously we've got multiple things going on over here. It's not just male versus female. There are race issues and LGBTQ issues and all kinds of things. And I think maybe the opinion is we let things go too far. Like, maybe if we had been a little bit more militant, maybe we could have squashed this uprising of all this horrible stuff to protect people. And maybe we just got so complacent in the States and took for granted our rights about certain things because we were just enjoying life. Even though I would say, you know, America's, in comparison to a lot of other countries, right, has always kind of been a dangerous place. But I think Americans had reached this point of sort of peace where they were like, oh, things are good. Like, we're never going to have to worry about going back to all that horrible stuff that used to happen. And now the people that know, right? And so all of us that know are like super activated right now. And I think people are more concerned about like shoving these people back into their holes. Like all these ne'er-do-wells that want to bring sort of the scourge of horrible stuff into the States. We're so focused on if we can just shove them back in those deep, dark holes with all of their horrible thoughts that are going to, you know, send us back generations in women's rights, gay rights, you know, race-related rights. Yeah, you're right. I think there has to be a conversation too about how do we prevent this type of thing from reoccurring. So yeah, we've got our work cut out for us in the States for sure.
Yeah, no, it is interesting, and I do I do worry a little bit for the younger generation, because so it makes me think back to as well how you were like, you know, we need more men stepping up and leading, and we do, but most men of my generation, myself included, grew up without male mentors.
Mm.
So we're unless we found it ourselves, like we didn't grow up with our dad, you know, by our side, teaching us, watching him. Like most boys grew up parented by their mother, you know, and then went to school and their teachers were all female. And, you know, the only male interaction might be, you know, like a principal or something, administration, not the caregivers, not the teachers, not the nurturers. And so yeah, it's really tricky. It's sort of trying to create this whole, you know, this create things from scratch, essentially, when we haven't had it. And so, yeah, it'll be a bit of a struggle. And unfortunately, what happens is sometimes the loudest voices end up becoming the de facto leaders. And that's what we're seeing. Like a lot of the loud voices are men leaning back into being men, but like being men in a traditional way of, you know, power and strength and leading, and
What they think is
non-encompassing
power, which
what they think is power.
I would disagree, and I think you probably would as well. That what I think real power is softness. You know, to find a man that is, which no one's perfect, just no one is, man, woman, whatever. We're all flawed human beings, but to sort of lean into that part of ourselves that society would deem as unnecessary, right? So for the women, that, you know, society would tell us more so, be soft, be non-combative, don't be a problem. Like all of that stuff doesn't really serve women at all. So then, you know, people my generation have tried to foster those skills that maybe we saw from our fathers of what they displayed as strength or how they interacted with their male counterparts. I was actually pretty fortunate to be around my dad and my grandpa, who I thought were pretty decent role models. And yeah, I had a mom, and, you know, I had two grandmothers, like one passed away whenever I was young, but I think I almost have the adverse of what you had, like had real, like strong male influences of what would be considered like a heterosexual type response to, you know, relationships. Whenever I was in relationships, I sort of assumed that role of what I thought it meant to be, you know, we're really talking about like old type thoughts here, right? But as far as what was modeled, right, of like a man and a woman relationship, my father and my mother, strengths and weaknesses and all that. And then whenever I was in a lesbian relationship, I did that. I tried to like emulate what I thought was respectful and kind and compassionate from that other perspective. I don't know if any of this is resonating with you, but I think it's an interesting conversation to have because, like, it takes all types, and yeah, it doesn't come with a handbook, and nobody really sits us down, or at least our generation was like, look, this is how you have a like really positive relationship. Like, this is what that looks like. We were just fumbling about and trying to figure it out on our own.
So I think a big thing that, and I totally track what you're talking about, is if we could recognize masculine and feminine energy, but see it as balance in both genders. So masculine energy isn't just a male thing, and feminine energy isn't just a female thing. Unfortunately, because the way we name these things, that's how we approach it. I mean, if we called it yin and yang, it might clear things up. But if we think about that balance, so that's what we see a lot of is usually we're out of balance, and it females as well. So like you, I mean, I can feel that you have more masculine energy typically that comes through. That's not a bad thing, but
obviously, because I'm a single mom, like I'm doing it both.
Exactly. And so once we can see that there's both energies, and so we can recognize both those energies in ourselves and create our own balance, that our own set point that feels right for us, it really would make a big difference. And as you said, like having like real strength, the problem is for men, we don't have a lot of examples of strength coming from that feminine energy, coming from, holding space, compassion, empathy, feeling emotion. But there is strength in that because that's balance. So I know I did a TEDx this past summer. It hasn't been released yet, but it was important to me to, lean into the emotion so I could show that vulnerability. In that conversation, in the talk itself, I teared up for parts of it. And I want to show like emotion isn't a weakness, but typically we only see it as a weakness because a lot of times men, if they don't know how to control or use their emotions, they're overwhelmed by the emotions. So when you see them emotional, they're usually in a weak state because they're not managing that emotion. They're overwhelmed. And so, yeah, we definitely need to see more strength in that vulnerability. We don't have a lot of examples, and it requires us to actually accept that is part of what being a man is, feminine energy. And in the same way that part of being a woman is masculine energy. Like it's this real balance. But and once you start noticing it, you notice it more and more with the people you interact with, and you could feel it. You could feel where they sit on that. But unfortunately, a lot of times we reject one polarity or try to reject one. And that's where we see so much more imbalance in just society in general.
Yeah, I think the yin and yang is actually a really good example of that. And to be honest with you, it makes me wonder because right now in the US, right, we're going through this filtration process of what we think is appropriate and not, and what education is appropriate, who can teach it, all these sorts of things. So it makes me wonder, like, how much knowledge do these kids have exposure to? What is actual truth? I mean, our government can't even get it together right now, right? Like they can't even decide what should be allowed as far as what our history actually is. And, I think there's that conversation right now about, what our children can digest. I think they are actually really resilient and would benefit from the truth. But that all feeds into this, masculine and feminine energy as well. And I think if you speak with truth and speak with purpose, it's easier to have those conversations because it's easier for you to admit that you're wrong. I mean, I'm not right about everything. I think you would agree with me too. Like those of us that have done any kind of work still know that we're flawed, still know that we have, probably a lifetime of learning and will probably never be done.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the crappiest part of doing the work is that point where you realize, oh, there is no end. I'll never be.
There's a constant test.
Yeah.
I had a kid tell me once, you probably heard the same thing, where they're like, I can't wait to be a grown up because then I'm done taking tests. I'm like, listen, that's not the case. You will be forever taking tests.
Exactly. And that's the thing. And you start doing it. You're like, if I just read this next book or I just do this one thing, like I'll be good. And then you realize, oh, I'll never, like, that's not how this works.
Yeah. This is a lifelong evolution process of your best self.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is so interesting. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
We go down some interesting holes in our conversations for sure. So going back to, we spoke about that. I had some notes for today just because I want to make sure and hit the things. Oh, let's talk about independence. So I was not aware because obviously right now I'm in like American Revolutionary mode, and especially with this miniseries coming out. I also recently went to a Daughters of the American Revolution meeting because I'm curious about maybe joining. My family can't trace ties back to a military member that participated in the American Revolutionary War. So I thought because I already like genealogy, why not take it a step further? And then, if anybody else later down the road might be interested, then, I've laid one more track for them. I actually have one of my mom's family members that's already a member, which I was not aware of. So, technically, that should make the process easier. But whenever I was preparing for this, I was like, well, let me just find out about Canada. Because I think often we don't, especially in the States, they don't teach us a lot about other countries. We kind of have to dig it up on our own. So I was not aware. Obviously I got this from the internet, so you're going to fact check me here. But it said Canada's path to independence was gradual. They had the Confederation on July 1st, 1867, and became a self-governing dominion within the British Empire. Full legal autonomy within the Statute of Winchester was in 1931, and you achieved complete independence on April 17, 1982, when the Constitution Act was patriated, severing the final legal ties to British Parliament. I was like, 1982? I was born in 1983. I was shocked by that.
And we're still part of the Commonwealth. I mean, the king is on our currency.
Yeah.
We still, yeah.
I just found it really fascinating. I was really shocked. I think, and, just being fully transparent, I should have done this research a long time ago, considering Canada's just right next door. But just talking about these types of things.
What I find interesting, because again, I travel to the US quite a bit and have a lot of American friends. And so a lot of times I find I'm bringing information back to my Canadian fellows about these crazy Americans that we see on the TV all the time. And what they're really like. I feel like almost, do you remember that old Fraggle Rock?
Yes.
And what was it? The grandpa and the uncle? What was he'd go? He was in the human world and encountering all these things. Yeah,
I'm sure Canadians feel like it's like a different universe over here.
It is, but it isn't. And that's what's so interesting. It really isn't, because a lot of our pop culture, our music, our news, our information, it's all the same. Like it's not as different as Canadians would think it is. But one thing I've sort of played with in terms of an idea is around this independence, because there is in Canada more of a trend towards the collective and the greater good and community. But we are part of the Commonwealth. We didn't, fight our way away from the British Empire and have this civil war. We didn't have that.
Yeah.
Whereas in the US that did happen. So there is the king can't tell us what to do. We have our own personal individual rights, individual independence. And so that individuality is part of the birth of the US. And I notice, as far as just broad strokes differences, that's a big one between Canada and the US. Right there is collective versus the individual. And a lot of it comes from the forming of the country.
I would agree with you. Actually, I had in my notes, because I was like, we're just going to hit as many things as we can today. And just for notes' sake, I did write it down just because I want to make sure and fact check myself. America declared independence in 1776 with the Declaration of Independence. but was not officially recognized as an independent nation until the end of the Revolutionary War in 1783 with the signing of the Treaty of Paris. So, for those history nuts out there, I figured I'd just give you some fact-checking stuff. But in talking about those types of things, because we're so close and, essentially we have an imaginary border. There's some states that you can, for all intents and purposes, just walk across the border, towns kind of touch, and there would be very little difference from, say, like northern Minnesota to Canada, northern New York to Canada, Washington State, Canada, like the whole top, just any of those communities that would be used to just going back and forth. I mean, the Native communities that, they still believe there should be more of an invisible line because that was part of their original territory. I find it really fascinating how Canada, because you guys are also very big, decided we're going to do more universal health care up here. And the US is like, no. I think, if I remember correctly, just the more normal Canadian probably would have a little bit more access to higher education than would people in the States, I think. There might not be such a large wealth gap in people that could go and could not. For example, Indiana and very rural parts, pretty much your only way out is if you make really good grades and maybe you get some scholarship to go to any university, or you join the military, essentially. Those are your two routes out. You have to be a really, really good student, or you join the military. And it would seem that Canada might be slightly different. What do you think?
Yeah, I can't speak to education. I mean, most Canadians, if they want to go to school, go to secondary education. It's a possibility.
Fairly attainable.
That's not going to be for everyone, obviously, but most, if they want to go to university, they can. It's affordable. So there is that. But yeah, the universal healthcare is a big one. And I think that comes back to the individuality or the collective. Like most Canadians, like we have our issues with healthcare here, but it would be hard to find a Canadian that would think it's unfair to pay for someone else's health care.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you guys have certain protections also to where, someone's not going to be destitute and their house is not going to be taken from them if they have some major medical thing.
Well, we don't pay for anything. Now, the downside, like there's some things like obviously dental and, our eye care and things like that. But if I go to the hospital, I don't get charged. So at all.
I know it sounds silly that we're.
Yeah, like there might be, an ambulance fee, or there might be little things, but it would never cross our mind to the degree. So my ex-wife, she worked on the political side in Ministry of Health, and they get these calls all the time, like Canadians that would travel over to the US or across the border and be destitute because they didn't have insurance when they crossed the border, because it didn't even cross their mind that they need it, or something happened. And so they checked into a hospital and they're there for a week and not a big deal. And they get a bill and they're like, we just bankrupted our family. Like it doesn't like a lot of Canadians, it doesn't even cross their mind that they would have to pay or that they could go destitute because of health, which is just crazy. Like it's just a crazy concept for us.
Well, let's dive in that to a little bit more, because I don't even think that I know as well as I should how your healthcare works up there. But when you said you pay nothing, that means on the monthly, how does that work with your medical? Like, what do you pay? Does it come directly out of your check? Do you pay a certain percentage to allow you to participate in universal healthcare? Like, I think people really need to hear it mapped out for them, like exactly how it works, because I'm even struggling with this conversation.
Well, I don't know if you know this, but I'm not a details person. So I'm the last person you want to ask for specifics on anything.
Well, I'm
But
not expecting you to tell me down to the penny of like I pay $542.13. No.
But there's no opt-in. Like everybody, there is different provinces. We might have like a monthly cost, a low monthly cost, but there's no opt-in or opt-out, or everyone. If you go to the hospital, you just go to the hospital. There's
Right.
Yeah. Now, there is some of the stuff that's bad about that is that there is, you can't pay necessarily to jump queues a lot of the time. So a hip surgery might take forever, an MRI might take forever. You're in a queue. You're not paying for the guy who will get you in that day. Mm-hmm. And that's where Canada's almost the opposite. As soon as we start talking about like a two-tier system where we've got like everybody's covered, but you can pay for better service, there's a lot of pushback. People don't like anyone getting priority treatment because of money when it comes to health.
Well, the reason I find that interesting is because right now, they just we had a government shutdown. Then there were some people that caved. There's all kinds of opinions across the board on whether they should have or shouldn't have. But there are people in different states that are already getting bills essentially in anticipation of 2026 that are saying that their current health coverage, it's going to go up by at least 50%, for example. And a lot of these people aren't going to be able to pay. So I think it was important to have this conversation just to, roll it around a bit in the mind. I think a lot of people in the States feel like, oh no, like we could never do universal health care. Like it's not even a possibility.
Yeah. So it's so funny. For us, we wouldn't even think anything of it, but I know it would take time because there's efficiencies and there's a whole system that needs to be broken apart. Like right now, I find it crazy that when you go to the US, if you have health coverage, mm-hmm. what the doctor will charge is different than if you don't have health coverage, mm-hmm. because they overcharge the government. Mm-hmm. But if they're like, oh, you don't have a health plan, okay, we'll give you this other rate that's like mm-hmm. 10-20% of the cost. That's mm-hmm. just crazy. We don't have, like, our doctors, there is no direct billing to the client. This is what the services call, a doctor performed this procedure. This is what the government pays for it, period. So, mm-hmm. so there's all of that. So I would look at it, and again, a whole system has to change. I think that's why people hated Obamacare and everything else. Like you're trying to change the entire way your hospitals run, or the administration, or the back end. That's not an easy thing to do. But I would view it almost the same as I would with, say, like life insurance or something like mm-hmm. that. Like you're insuring, you're paying a small percentage. Everybody pays a small bit, hoping they'll never have to use it. Mm-hmm. And if the way the dice rolls, you're the one who uses it, everyone's got you covered. And it's funny because we do that with the, fire department. Mm-hmm. There was a time where you paid the fire department, and mm-hmm. if your house was on fire and you didn't have the plaque saying we paid you, they wouldn't put it out. And I think most Americans would be like, that's crazy.
Well, most Americans don't realize that, like your local volunteer fire department, that's essentially a socialist system. And mm-hmm. I know people in my own community that would probably, argue with me to the death on that. But it's just a fact. You're right. Like these are certain things that, police departments, fire departments, we've just decided, hey, that seems like a public good. We're going to contribute to that. Public education systems.
Schools, elementary, middle school, high school. There's certain things where you're like, what, you shouldn't, it doesn't make sense to pay. And the efficiencies mm-hmm. don't make sense either. Like it's, mm-hmm. So I do find that crazy. Well, the biggest thing I find crazy is that people will have all of a sudden a family member gets cancer and the entire family suffers financially mm-hmm. forever.
Oh, yeah.
And not
Yeah.
just the immediate family, but extended family, because everyone's jumping in, trying to help out this person. And you can't prepare for that financially. And
Well, something I find really interesting too is I don't know if you've been following this, but there's been changes in government all around the world. And the Irish government has decided that they're going to essentially give an artist stipend. And I was like, that's genius. Because I think there's so many people in the States that it's a common conversation that you have, like if you get into any kind of a job that has decent health care, they're like, oh, you better not do anything to lose that job. Like all of our conversations are based around health insurance because everybody knows all it takes is for one person to get sick, one kid to be born with some sort of like genetic abnormality or whatever. Like look at my kids. There's this conversation about autism and ABA services. And in the state of Indiana, there were some people that had sort of like misused some funds. So now they're reducing services for kids. Like we never used to have a cap on ABA services. And they're talking about it more from a, financial perspective, right? Because everything's financial over here. But some of these people are traveling very far to even get their children to an ABA center, and they have to be on the list first. So like some of these people have a diagnosis and they can't even get ABA services yet. And then once they do get ABA services, then they only have 3 years now in the state of Indiana. I've known people that their kids were in ABA for 8 years and it was legitimate and they needed those services. And basically the state of Indiana is now like, well, like we're kind of out of money, rather than having that conversation of how much is it going to cost us in the long run, which it seems very clear that they're not even concerned about that. Everybody knows, like stats will tell you early intervention is best. And I've watched that with my own children, all 3 of my kids. Like they couldn't even speak really. My older kid had a language regression. These people, like the RBTs, the BCBAs, they are a godsend. Like I can't even begin to tell people, like just to sing their praises, like I couldn't do these things that they did with my kids. And then to think, which I already know there's all these hurdles to jump through and all this stuff, but to think that there are going to be kids left behind. It wasn't their fault that they were born that way. There's nothing wrong with them. They just need a little bit of help. But to see, my kids have been in there, I want to say they're going on like their 2nd year. So they've only really got 1 year left, right? And like the progress has just been exponential. Like Kai now, he just rattles off. I mean, it might not make sense to other people, which is fine, but even just the speech portion of it. Like Koa wouldn't even make eye contact. And now not only does he make eye contact, like he plays with his siblings, he plays with other kids, he plays chase. He can say a handful of words. Apparently he says more at school. But like my family is just one success story. And the fact that we're not having these types of conversations, and on top of it, there are people having like I feel unnecessary conversations, which is more so, let's throw all this money at this problem of fixing autism. Let's just fix it. And if we can't fix it, let's just get it out of the population. Well, now we're talking eugenics. Now, they're not saying that necessarily out loud, but they're inching towards that. And those of us paying attention can see it for what it is. And I'm like, right, you go after autism. It's just not a hard step to go from like, all right, you know what? We don't really need to provide services to wheelchairs. In fact, I'm pretty sure that our government has just decided they're not going to pay sign language interpreters, like for the government stuff. And I'm like, wait a minute. Like, when you're an American, you're an American. If you were born a disabled American, or if you became a disabled American, disability can happen to anybody at any point in time. So now now we're like going back to those types of conversations. And then, not that it's perfect, but here we have a really good example up north. We can just hop to Canada and be like, hey, maybe it's not perfect, but how did you guys do some of this? We can cross the ocean, maybe. Let's go have a conversation with the Finns about, right, your education system seems to be working pretty well because you guys are always scoring like #1 in the world. How did you do that? Will you teach us? Like, nobody's expecting things to be perfect, but like, I'm astonished by how little critical thinking is going into these politicians, which I think then leads me down the rabbit hole to say, I feel quite clearly they have now risen to a position where they feel they are not beholden to the American constituents anymore. And herein lies the problem. Because now, all of a sudden, we've got a bunch of guys, women, whatever, sitting in seats that we put them in, that we are paying for, and they're like, eh. So I find it really interesting right now that Ken Burns comes out with his documentary, because I feel like I knew a lot about the American Revolution, but clearly the American populace needs a refresher, because like you said, we are a little different. There probably is, there are probably a multitude of reasons why we do things. And a lot of that is probably rooted in the American Revolution. So great. Let's have a refresher course. Let's start, realizing that nationalism doesn't work and start talking to our friends, which I'm so happy that I have Canadian friends that will be honest and have these conversations.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of different ways to do it. And yeah, I was just thinking how you're talking about even like early intervention. Health, you get in an accident or you have a stroke. We don't wait for our insurance to come through.
Really? So they don't leave you in a gurney in the hallway of the emergency room? Hold on a second.
Yeah, wait, we got to check on this.
Make sure that your insurance clears first.
Right? Because that's the thing, is some of those things, those first hours are critical. Mm-hmm. That beginning is critical. And being able to intervene without, I wouldn't want to just wait. I got to contact my insurance, make sure the doctor talks to them. This is and then find out after, if I didn't do that, I don't get insured. It's crazy.
There's some crazy stuff going on over here. I'll tell you, I saw a video the other day of this lady, which I think, people were aware of this, but as they say, a picture's worth 1,000 words and the videos are better. This poor woman was in full-blown delivery and sitting in the wheelchair while the lady is taking her medical information, like inactive labor. And her mother's videotaping it. And is this how you treat everybody, or is this just how you treat Black folk? And I was like, there's literally nothing you can say, because I can't say that I think that they would have let some white ladies sit there in active labor and just do nothing and just keep asking her questions. So I think, we've got some really big problems that need fixing. And like you said earlier, to the pain points, for whatever reason, it just seems like I think America was just born out of this just bloody feud. And it's always about waking the dragon with us. But then it's like you pull that tail long enough and then stuff starts to happen, it seems like. I'm hopeful anyway, because I just feel like we just can't keep seeing this stuff and just be like, oh, well, I guess we don't have any better options whenever, like I said, we've just got Canada next door, who is I know there are a lot of websites that are blocked and whatever, but, maybe there should be a Canadian, this is sort of my help. I'm trying to bridge a gap here for people that don't know a Canadian, right? And I'm let me bring some of my Canadian friends on to tell them how things work in Canada, and that we could do that here.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it can be done. But it requires a whole, the group think to shift. Thinking of the collective. that's a big, that's very different.
So you think
So,
most Canadians just kind of feel like why wouldn't you feed poor kids?
yeah, like there's still going to be, greed and selfishness and like the same similar arguments, but in
Mm-hmm.
general, I mean, I think the pandemic was a good example where Canadians just thought, I don't care about my own personal rights and safety. What's best for the community?
Mm-hmm.
It's just that's a natural, like most Canadians, that would be the direction they'd go. And I
Mm-hmm.
think most Americans are more about individual, like rights are so important there. Like
Yeah.
your individual rights and no one telling you what to do. And I think that comes from that, the Civil War and
Mm-hmm.
independence. And so if you're to make big change like you're talking about, I try to do it under the lens of let's assume that people are more focused on the individual than the
Mm-hmm.
collective, because
Mm-hmm.
that is the current reality.
Mm-hmm.
So what speaks to that person? Why would that person want to make this change? It's your argument is going to be different than the argument in Canada
Right.
because people think differently.
Mm-hmm.
But if they start seeing like this is better for but this is better for you,
Mm-hmm.
that's probably the angle you need to take. And then people might
Well,
start to
let's
see
do
it.
a little highlighting on some beneficial things that Canada has that I think most Americans would love. I think, if I'm correct, you have your hot spring areas that I'm trying to remember. I saw one because I was curious. I was wanting to go to one in the States somewhere. And I remember reading this article that I think it was in Ontario. There was this hot spring area that just regular Canadians could, pay like a day pass to or something like that. That was like reasonable. And everybody went. And it had these outdoor pools and all this stuff. It was sort of like like a Swedish experience sort of thing. But just normal people were going. And it was like affordable. And I was like, it's just shocking how many things in the States that are like other countries consider as part of the community, part of the experience, like the Moroccan hammams, for example. Like
Yeah, I was just in
every community,
Japan. Onsen's
every
everywhere.
community has one, right? And that everyone has some level of access. But in the States, it's like, no, you have to be rich and it's a gated thing and you have to spend a boatload of money and you have to wait your entire life to maybe experience that. And then, for example, maybe people in Minnesota and New York don't even know that like an hour away they could do this thing. I just want you to speak on that because I know we know about these types of things, but most Americans don't know.
I mean, I don't know.
Like, what do you have around where you are?
I mean, where I am, I'm on Vancouver Island, so I
Right.
have
But do you have anything
some of
there
the
for the
best
community?
hikes and public parks and trees on the West Coast. So,
What is
um,
your normal layperson? Because I know Vancouver Island is a little bit more expensive, but for the poor people out where you are, what do they actually have access to?
I mean, I don't know about free access, but like
Reasonable access.
healthcare.
Besides healthcare.
So like even someone who's homeless on the street can walk into a hospital and get looked at.
Well,
Yeah, that's a
that's
big
pretty
one.
good. That is a big one.
Yeah. But otherwise, I don't know because the hot spring one wouldn't jump to me, and we do have a lot of our parks and you don't pay to access them,
Mm-hmm.
but the U.S. national parks are amazing and
This is
relatively
true.
affordable. Like I don't know if most Americans take advantage of like an annual pass to see all like unlimited access to the national parks and what you get and the facilities. It's phenomenal.
True.
So you have some of those things.
I think the state parks are about it, though, to be honest. The state and the national parks, Thank God we at least had a few presidents that were interested in something like that. But outside of that, it just seems like if we could get a wrangle on something good in healthcare, which I think is going to have to lead towards some type of universal healthcare, and also, you know, if people had access to some type of healthcare, then they could do the things that they really wanted to do. And
Yeah.
let's say you're an artist, you're a painter, you're a musician. Like, we are already having a major brain drain. And I know Canada's already getting a good portion of our medical staff because you guys opened your doors, and I think that was great. So, yeah, no, I was really interested by what Ireland did recently because I was like, you know what? We're just losing generations of people that could be doing really interesting stuff, like really innovative stuff. And for some reason, it just seems like our greed has overwhelmed us over here when it's like, oh, well, you have to have a few rich guys come over from a different country that really probably didn't have any of those ideas on their own and stole those ideas from people anyway, and then you're just going to keep giving them more money rather than maybe investing in some of your youth. Like, maybe there are some American kids that might have some really amazing ideas, and the key to that could be universal health care, where it's like, look, then the parents don't have to worry about, oh, when are they going to age out of my plan because they're still in college, and that whole buffer zone because your kid can't get a job, they're living in your basement or whatever. And then maybe they might come up with some brilliant idea that they could then turn into a business. I don't know. I just kind of like feel like we are massively missing the buck. It is purposeful. It is meant to keep the majority of the Americans poor, which is very anti-American and anti-innovator. And I don't know. Your thoughts from the Canadian perspective is great.
Good. Well, I'm glad I could bring, a different side of it
You
and
must
show
feel
like,
really safe in Canada.
well, there is that. That's a big one.
Yeah. Like,
I
I can't
mean,
even imagine how safe it must feel in Canada right now, just looking at what's going on down here. Like, oh my God.
well, even things like I don't worry about locking my doors. I
Mm,
do, but if I forget, it's not a big
yeah.
deal. My house or my car.
Yeah.
So there's that. I have friends that have guns because they're enthusiasts or they're
Sure.
hunters,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know anyone as a Canadian that has a gun for defense
Mm,
that they keep with them in their purse or their glove box or their
mm-hmm.
bedside table for
Mm-hmm.
security. Like, it wouldn't even cross our mind that we'd have a gun for defense. So yeah, and I noticed too. So there's the individuality, but there's another interesting thing is, and I heard this a while back. They always talk about all immigrants coming to the U.S. and
Mm-hmm.
U.S. being a melting pot,
Mm-hmm.
and it is. It's
True.
everyone sort of comes in and the idea is everyone becomes an American.
Mm-hmm.
In Canada, they'll describe it sometimes more as like a kaleidoscope.
Mm.
So people come in and they keep their traditions, their identity, their culture. So we'll have like Diwali festivals and all these things. Like, it's not so much like a melting,
Mm.
and we don't look down on people maintain, like, we love those traditions.
Mm-hmm.
We get better food because of it, and better
Right.
traditions and festivals and like,
Mm-hmm.
there's a bit of an embracing of that. And I also see there's also more of a mix. So like, even though the US is a melting pot in terms of like friend groups, I feel
Mm-hmm.
they're a lot more homogenous.
Yeah.
And so it wouldn't be, well, at least where I am on the West Coast, it's very common for all sorts of races to be in the same friend group.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I see less of that in the US when I'm through my
Yeah.
travels. you rarely see, people hanging out together.
Well, tell us about your travels. Let's talk about Texas. I haven't been there in a long time.
So it's Austin, which is, most progressive.
Austin's one of the good
Yeah.
spots
In
in
terms
Texas.
of Texas, it's growing on me. I mean, it is good old boys, but again, there's a friendliness to it, and sort of like Indiana, like people are, they're not as cold. The music scene's amazing. It's different. I do notice the consumerism is crazy. Like people buy a lot in the US. You're mentioning Amazon, like people buy a lot. They're buying all the time and everything. We buy a lot here too. And maybe it's that I'm not much of a consumer, so I might miss some of what most Canadians are doing. But I do get this feeling when I'm down there that there's a lot more consumerism, even just in the sense of fast foods, like fast food restaurants everywhere.
That's true.
Yeah. Whereas, because it's just that quick, like we're just buying stuff. I'm hungry. I'll just go pull over, buy something. I'll buy food, buy clothes, buy things, buy knickknacks. So, yeah.
So where you're living in Vancouver Island, what would say be like the diameter of your travel that like you realistically would do in a day for, say, I don't know, dropping your kids off, picking them up from school, going to the grocery store, all those types of things? Like how close is all of that to where you live?
Well, everything's close. I'm not in Vancouver, Victoria. So like a long drive would be a 15-minute drive. A really long drive would be a 30-minute drive. And my kids, I purposely found a place where like my son bikes to school. They can walk home if they need to. The proximity is there. So I usually don't drive in any direction much more than 5 or 10 minutes usually.
So the reason I'm asking is because like I think depending upon where you live in the US, you have to drive further, which means we're in the car longer. And if you're kind of like constantly in this hurried state, then I think that's where the convenience comes in. So like I would take my kids just one way to school is about a 30-minute drive. So then you're talking an hour round trip to go to school. If your kids go to public school and it's right in your town, that's great. Maybe you're not traveling as far. But the farther out you are, the longer you have to, say, go to the grocery store even. Like some of these small towns don't even have a grocery store. And maybe the only grocery store you have by you is maybe a Walmart or an Aldi or something that might be 30 miles away. So I think that's probably why, not making excuses for it, but as far as rationale, it makes me think that might be why, we have that. Also, that's also by design, because if you see it, then you want to buy it. So it makes good sense for them to put it, at the intersection of a highway, off ramp, at a stop sign, things like that. But yeah, like that whole convenience thing in the US where it's like, I've got all these things that I have to do in the day, and I either am not carving out enough time or I don't think I have enough time to make food. And even if I did, then I have to store it throughout the day. That's why I was curious, like what the circumference is for the driving.
I don't drive very far. When I'm when I'm in Austin, I'm driving a lot.
Right.
I'm in the car.
Like I said, not making
but
excuses for it, but I'm just kind of plotting it out in my mind. Like, okay, if that is more common, like that experience that you're talking about, if that is a more common experience for Canadians to have most of the things of what they may need in close proximity to their homes, or is that just in your area?
Hard to say. I mean, there's going to be a bigger commute in Vancouver, in Toronto, like they're bigger cities. So yeah, but we don't have as many big cities, so yeah, a lot of places probably are more community based outside of those major centers.
If you were to drive from, say, I don't know, Vancouver to another big city, any big city, let's make it a farther one.
I don't know.
Have you done any of those long drives?
Like you're a couple hours away. Like Canada's big. Cities are far away.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're still driving far.
Yeah,
And so
but
you can do
I'm
a
just
large
thinking
commute.
about it. Like if you do like a long drive, right? Like let's say, I don't know, would a 5-hour drive be far for you?
I think we're the same in this US, like in North America,
Yeah,
like we're not like Europe, like we'll do long
right.
drives. You
So
know,
how many I'm bad with the Canadian fast food. Hortons is it coffee?
yeah, Tim Hortons is big. It's bigger out east, but it's
Okay.
here. We've got like the
Okay.
Starbucks. I'm on the West Coast, and
Right.
we'll have things.
So,
Vancouver will have more fast food stuff.
as you're driving
It's
along, how many fast food places you think you might hit if say we were taking like a 5 or 6 hour drive?
oh 5%. Well, I don't know if you're on the highways, it'll be sort of similar, but we don't.
Okay. I've not
Yeah,
done any lengthy drives in Canada. That's why I'm trying to compare and contrast to see if it's how similar it is.
I mean, I don't know.
I've just flown in and flown out. I've never done
Yeah,
any of the long drives in Canada.
yeah, they might sprawl. I mean, it's been a while since I did a big road trip, but I do feel like there's more truck stops and gas
Okay.
stations. We'll have some fast food. I don't know. It feels like it's more prevalent there. Maybe it's just because I'm in Austin and in Texas. There's just a ton. There's a lot. Like
Yeah.
I don't see that number of fast food places or choices
Mm-hmm.
or lineups like that. Like we've got McDonald's and
Right.
we've got all the more normal things. And if you need fast food and if you want to eat fast food all the time, you can.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, what are your top 5 fast food type places in Canada that people should try? Because now people are going to be curious. Because I
Oh, well, we
mentioned
don't have
Hortons.
many. Tim Hortons people love. I'm not a big Tim Hortons fan, but people
No,
do love it. A&W is
really.
that's a
I used
Canadian
to
place.
love A&W. We
Yeah,
don't
that'd
see
be more.
those very much anymore.
Yeah, I don't think they're big in the US. That'd be a Canadian one. And then I don't know. A lot of the other ones would be ones that came from the US,
Mm.
right? Like, but we don't like here, for example. As far as I know in Victoria, like we don't have a Chick-fil-A. We don't have, you know, a lot of the fast food places. Like if I want a burger, I'm going to like an A&W or a
Mm-hmm.
McDonald's, or
Mm-hmm.
we might have well, to give you an idea. So Victoria, I think we might have one Burger King. We
Okay.
probably have like, 3 or 4 McDonald's, more Starbucks, but like it's a pretty like it's a city.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
So, people interested in coming to Victoria now because we've spoken about it so much, what would be your top 10 for people? Like if they're going to come up to Victoria, see these 10 things before you leave, sort of thing.
well, the number one that most people come to Victoria and is Bouchard Gardens, and they
Mm-hmm.
come and they view these beautiful gardens, and that's what most tourists or cruise ship passengers, that's all they come to see. We also have high tea at the Empress Building right down in Inner
Mm-hmm.
Harbor, which is beautiful, and the Parliament's
Mm-hmm.
beautiful. Whale watching. What I think most people overlook is the natural beauty. So you just get out of Victoria just a little bit, and you're seeing some of the largest cedars in the world and redwoods and
Mm-hmm.
or not redwoods, Douglas fir and
Mm-hmm.
cedars and arbutus and some beautiful trails and hikes and kids
So let's
experiencing
get
that.
your top 10, not your normal Victoria top 10. Let's get yours.
So my top 10 straight off
Hiking.
the bat, go see some trees.
Mm-hmm.
Go see some trees. Like even if you're right in Victoria, like there's hikes within 15, 30 minutes where you can see some really cool old trees. And because it's West Coast, you're going to get like that, the moss and that like sort of deep, sort of almost damp feel to it. But
Mm-hmm.
the immensity of it, I love that side of it.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a lot of fun outdoor patios because the weather here is very temperate. So people can sit
Mm-hmm.
outside most of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Craft brewing's big. Our coffee's big. Eat some sushi if you're here. It's not It's not Vancouver, but we are very spoiled with our seafood in Victoria. And yeah, I would put those near the top. Whale watching is also very cool if you've never done it.
Okay.
Yeah, scuba diving. There's some of the best diving.
I wasn't aware that this. I should
in
have
a way,
thought
yeah.
the scuba was going to be big, but I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, it's cold water diving, but it's some very cool stuff to see. So
All
diving.
right. How about your top brew of all the different beers that you make in Victoria? Is there one that's your favorite?
I'm not huge on a lot of the Victoria beers personally.
All right.
But we do have a lot of breweries. I'm trying to think. Oh, yeah, there is one that's not in Victoria. It's in Vancouver, but we have a brewery in Victoria, Superflux. They have a really good hazy IPA that I like.
All right.
I go there quite often.
Very good. So is there one cafe or any of those outdoor spaces that you kind of feel like people really should try and go there if they can?
We have a lot of outdoor patios. So to give you an idea, and this is a little ridiculous. This is a little ridiculous, and most people don't do this, but we do a canoe crawl, which is like a pub crawl in a canoe up the gorge, and we will stop at all these little breweries along the way because there's a bunch of them. But for me, I like Superflux. We have craft beer right on the water. We have Blue and Batten on the water. We have Glow on the water. All these little spots where you could sit on an outdoor patio on the water and have a drink. And they're all beautiful spots. Empress is beautiful as well. I rarely go there just because it's a little bit more touristy, but it's looking right on the inner harbor. It's beautiful. It's the downtown view of Victoria is beautiful. It is a beautiful place. Sort of old Victorian, a lot of,
I was in Victoria once. I'm pretty sure I've only been there once, but definitely I need to come back and visit. And so that's why I was like, I know people are going to ask me, because if I'm talking to you and you're from Victoria, they're going to be like, why didn't you ask him about this? So is there anything else that's really on your heart or on your mind that you want to share with people, whether it's about Victoria, about yourself, or something that you're doing?
Well, if it's Victoria, if you're just stuck for 1 or 2 days, enjoy the beauty, get out for some hikes, see some trees, do some diving, whale watching, kayaking, something on the water. It is beautiful. If you're longer, then you could do a really cool adventure and do a camp out, or see, like, we've got the largest cedars in the world on Vancouver Island. So there's some of the largest trees in Canada are on Vancouver Island. So there's some really cool stuff to see if you love nature. North Coast or West Coast Trail, people have probably heard of. Tofino, people probably have heard of. Those are all, possible from Victoria. And then for myself, I'm just excited about the stuff I'm working on, because all these things we talked about, it is financial literacy. That's sort of what my movement is based around. Right. But it really isn't. It's really based around curiosity and conversation. So it's which I think we don't have enough of. Like we talked last time about critical thinking. Yeah. I think we need a little bit more curiosity and just looking at things from multiple sides and knowing there's no right or wrong answer. There's just an answer that resonates most with you. And so I'm excited about that. I'm excited about some stuff that I've got going with schools right now, where I've got a classroom kit, super affordable, consists of my books, the conversation decks, and a teacher plan. No prep for teachers. It's all conversation based. It fills that entire spot where that gap we have right now with financial literacy around values, meaning, mindful decisions and choices, generosity, and all of those things. It fills that through conversation and changing the way we think about money.
And where can people find that?
So if they go to theawesomestuff.com, they can find information, reach out to me, or if they want me to come in and speak at their schools, daviddelisle.com, and I talk about all my speaking, and we'll come in as well. So,
all right. And when is your TED Talk coming out?
I don't know. So a lot of the people's TED from the event, it's already come out, but mine's
Okay.
been chosen to be featured.
Oh,
So there's a specific rollout that they've got a plan around it, and I haven't gotten an official date yet, but I'm hoping soon.
in the next few months.
Yeah, definitely within the next few months. And it's all around basically trying to flip the script on how we talk about money.
Right.
And I challenge, things that we take for granted, things that we say that we take for granted, and sort of challenge everything we think about spending, saving, and generosity.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good one.
David, every time that I talk to you, I always feel enlightened whenever I leave, and you're always a breath of fresh air. So I appreciate you coming on today. You're always a wealth of knowledge as every time that you've come on, and I hope you come back again. Is there anything else that you want to tell people today before we leave?
That's everything. Just be curious.
Yeah.
Be curious.
So, like always, I always say to people, if there's anything, if they haven't gotten anything else from this conversation, what would you like for them to know about David Delisle?
That's a pretty heavy question.
I know, but I ask everybody this, and I asked you before, so it's not a shocker.
What did I say last time? Was it good?
I don't know. You probably said be curious. I don't keep track of that sort of thing because these are continuous conversations. It changes every time. It'll change the next time too.
Yeah. I mean, curiosity definitely is big. So I would love what I hope when people meet me and they leave with is just inspired by how amazing and beautiful the world is in general, and just see the beauty in this time we have. It really is incredible.
I think that's great. It's a great place to wrap up. Thank you, David, for coming on, and I hope we get to see you again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks so much. It's great being here.
Bye.
We are at a pivotal point in American history. We do not have the luxury to remain silent. Programs are disappearing every day. We hope that this podcast raises awareness and sparks a sense of advocacy in you. We all can make a difference. The important thing is to start. See you next time.